Clouds on Mars products, a place where you begin your journey with innovative, visionary, and easy to implement solutions for your business. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. This is Clouds on Mars products. In this series, we discuss products that we build for our customers, solutions that we build with our customers, but also topics that we cover during various discussions that we have with our clients. In this series, we touch real business challenges. We also discuss some technical details, but we also cover business impact that our solutions, products, and various elements of technology have on the business. My name is Marcin Kubica. I'm head of product at Clouds on Mars, and I'm joined by Estera Kot, CTO of Clouds on Mars. Estera, it's so good to have you here today.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here.
In this episode, we will discuss something that reminds me of a story that I heard years ago. It's about a boy who wanted to have a job on a farm on the countryside. And there was a kind of a job interview. And the farm owner asked him about his qualifications. And he basically gave a one sentence. He said, "I sleep well when the wind blows." And it is a nice analogy or nice segue to a topic of our episode today, which is resilience. And we want to talk about the resilience because not long ago, at the beginning of March, something happened in the Middle East region, in the Gulf area. As we can read in various news sources, a drone and a missile strike Amazon Web Services data centers in United Arab Emirates and in Bahrain. There were 2 facilities affected, and this was a serious thing. There was a fire, there were some structural damages, and entire cloud region went dark, and it has a certain impact on the business. Banks couldn't process their transactions, payment apps stopped working, several data platforms reported disruptions, and this was not a software bug. It was not a single device issue in one of the data centers. There was a military strike on a IT infrastructure. And this is why today we want to talk about resilience, what it means, why it matters, and what companies should do to be ready for situations like that. Also, the very important element is that cloud traditionally was perceived as something that is very resilient, something that really can guarantee safety of our applications and our data. So let's begin. Estera, let's start simple. When we say resilience in the context of cloud and data, what do we actually mean?
Yeah, I love etymology, so the explanation of the meaning of the words, I would start with digging into what the resilience means, and for sure it's some immaterial thing. So it's a concept that is explaining rebounding or springing back to the past. And yes, it's immaterial thing. And the easiest explanation that we can provide based on the meaning of the word means elasticity and the power, the capability to returning to original shape after some event. So for us, it will be, from the IT perspective, it will be a way how we can return after some event to the previous working operating state.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And in the context of cloud and data, can you give some specifics?
Yeah, so the easy way of thinking about resiliency is on a very specific example. Majority of us do shoppings, right? So imagine that instead of doing shoppings, you run a retail chain with, for example, 200 stores somewhere in Europe. And now one store has a pipe burst. You close it for a day. Your customers are figuring out the situation and choosing the next one. So revenue impact is minimal. System that you built absorbs a local failure or a single store and keeps running that. And now imagine all of the 200 stores share the same warehouse from which they get the things. And that warehouse floods. So every store runs out of the stock at the same time. No delivers, no revenue, because customers they cannot choose where to go. And this can happen, and this is what happens when your entire data platform, cloud infrastructure, run in a single cloud region that can go offline, and based on the SLA, is allowed to go offline for a few minutes within the year.
So, well, you are talking real business, right? It's not some IT stuff. We are talking revenue. So there is a certain impact on the business. But thinking about this event that happened from our perspective, we are recording this middle of March, and this happened basically 1 week ago, maybe 1 week and a half ago. Why this conversation about resilience is more urgent today than it was maybe, let's say, 1 year ago?
I believe that with the world of cloud computing, we believe that the things are in the clouds and they are not physical, but they are. And I would love to also elaborate about a few concepts just to give the deep understanding what we need to know when deciding where our physical infrastructure within the cloud provider is going to be located. But secondly, yes, the events that happened shake the entire world of cloud computing, because yes, the AWS data center was impacted. The region went offline. For your business, it means that the reports that you open every day are not working. Why? Because the pipeline, the data pipeline, the data ingestion pipeline that was happening during the night stopped. Why? Because the data center is not running. So no transformations, no dashboards refresh, no new data, and how to operate the business, how to know for the sales team, how to know what's the pipeline status. For operations, how to know the inventory levels. The finance team cannot close the books. Why? Because the way, if you as a customer have chosen just a single region without any replication and availability zones and any extra configuration, your processes based on the cloud infrastructure may not work because of the physical failure of a single either region or a data center.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned reports, and some may think, oh, it's just a report. There's no big deal if we cannot use this report for a day or two. It's really not a problem for us. But when we talk data centers and using data, the solutions that we built at Clouds on Mars, those solutions, for example, they have impact on price changes. So we have this concept of dynamic price changes, and those engines that drive those price changes, they need to have constant access to data. So it is indeed a big deal from the revenue perspective, the margin perspective, that we do have access to this data all the time, right?
Yes, definitely. And also I recall from the past a situation when I was working for a big electrical company, and there was a fire in a data center, and it was a local data center owned by the company. And the result was that the things, the data, the applications, all of the configurations, basically everything what was safe on the local data center was gone. Why? Because of the physical fire. And the move to cloud is just to save us from those situations. But when we design a solution based on Azure, based on AWS, based on other clouds, we need to be just wise to configure that properly to be resilient for any upcoming circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dig deeper and let's discuss now the risks that companies took under consideration in the past. And in a moment, we will discuss what other risks they also should take under consideration.
So there are at least three things that the industry treated as theoretical. But before I will list them, I need to introduce one concept which is used, well known. At the same time, the mother of knowledge is repetition. That's why give me a second to introduce the concept of availability zones, because this is a fundamental concept. for our cloud infrastructure. So availability zones are physically separated data centers within a single region. And each availability zone has independent power, cooling, networking. If one zone within the availability zone fails, the other keeps running. And just to give you a specific example, we have a region named East US, which is basically in Virginia. And this region has 3 availability zones. Zone 1, which is a data center cluster, some number or some name. Zone 2, and so on and so on. And what it means, that if you deploy any service, for example, Postgres or Azure SQL database or virtual machine with some redundancy enabled in East US, the cloud provider, Azure or AWS, will automatically distribute this primary and replicas across the 3 other zones. So if there is a power outage in zone 1, nothing is happening for you. Your application, your database is running because zone 2 and 3 picks up the traffic within the seconds, and it's running automatically. If we provision in Azure a few resources, you will figure out very quickly how to easily, through UI, configure availability zones.
Let's clarify one thing, Estera. So when you talk about availability zones, they are, and of course I will oversimplify here now, but they are basically in the same place. They are just 3 different data centers, but relatively close to each other. So we are safe from the perspective that maybe electricity source in one of the zones goes down. Then we are okay because there are 2 other zones available to us.
Yes, at the same time, if you take a look, and here I would love to pull the image of how the data center in Virginia has been growing, and also in Dublin, we are not talking about a building, and we are not talking about a soccer field. We are talking of multiple soccer fields, which are a data center. Also, was reading one book, very famous in Poland. We'll provide a link in a comment. And there was information that for humanity, we should know where the data centers are. We should know the physical address of them. And this is a lie. We can't know, because if we know, everyone can attack it. And now we have exercised how to provide a better security. That's why we never see and we never know a physical address of the data center. For us, is a cloud. But cloud needs to have some physical resources.
All right, so now let's discuss what has changed. What was not on this list, and it should be on the list now.
Good catch, good catch. So firstly, the geopolitical situation. Here, majority of the times we didn't consider that anything can happen in the past. Now we know, we updated our readiness to answer for those situations. And in the context of availability zones per every cloud, they are close but distributed, and distributed in a way that it will be hard to hit them in one shot. But because of the military operations, they cover hundreds of kilometers, and the capabilities to destroy everything what is walking on the ground is huge. That's why the zones are inside the blast radius, not outside it, because of the force, because of the power of the military as of now. That's the first aspect, geopolitical. The second is the coordinated physical attack. So if we know the addresses of the data centers, and there are, within a specific country, there are attacks on the 2 data centers, 2 physical facilities at the same time, it's not accidental. We can't say that it happened by coincidence, because knowing the addresses, knowing where they are, and then making sure that they both are damaged, it's intentional. It's a targeted distraction, which is coming back to the geopolitical situation. And the third would be what will happen after. So we know that we didn't estimate the situation globally. Secondly, if anything will happen for the availability zones, it's not accidental. So it must be serious and planned. And the third will be the supply chain disruption that will happen after the event. Because if majority of our retailers and food providers, they are based on cloud. And if the data center is physically damaged, the data are gone if the data were not replicated. The data are damaged, the processes are not running. The hardware, even if it will be replaced, it will be shipped from some place. It needs to be produced before it needs to be shipped. But if that's going to be shipped, the sea railways needs to be open, and we know that right now they are no. Airspace is also restricted. So the recovery will go with weeks and months. And even though people would like to get the Excel file from the cloud data, there will be no, because without availability zones, the data are gone.
Mm-hmm. So let's continue talking about the options that are offered by cloud providers like Microsoft, like Azure. You keep talking about those availability zones that are basically in one region. Is having replica in another region an option that we should consider when we think about resilience? What other options cloud providers offer in this area?
Good question. So first I will repeat availability zones, because again, 3 separate buildings, same region, and they protect one going down. So this is the bare minimum. But second, pay regions. Here, very often some services embedded this option. But what you should remember is that Azure pairs, as well as AWS, but Azure pairs, for example, West Europe in the Netherlands, which is physically next to the Amsterdam, with North Europe in Ireland. So very significant distance, over 1,000 kilometers, different countries, different legal restrictions, different power grids, different risk profiles, but the per regions is telling you that in case something will happen in your original region, then the second data center will take over from the capability perspective, and this is the link also to supply chain, that they have the capability to take over the entire function of the previous region. And there are some more sophisticated technologies like Azure Arc, and also how to bring cloud to on-prem world. So basically, if you do not use Azure at this time, you can manage all of your infrastructure, on-prem infrastructure, on-prem servers, like all edge endpoints, through the cloud, and have a control plane in a cloud to get cloud capabilities to your own edge devices. So for example, Azure Arc, when you have on-prem, but you want to get the capability coming from the cloud. But this is, I would say, that super resiliency level max. And the typical ones are configure availability zones. Secondly, check what's your paired region. And third, there are some databases, for example, like Cosmos DB, which is designed in a way that it's distributed globally. It also has some connections with the latency, how you query the data, because if the database is distributed globally, wherever you are, the latency is the lowest. But the point, whether before you decide on a specific service, at least after those events, check what's the disaster recovery strategy from a cloud provider.
Very good point. But coming back to this third region, this caught my attention. So there is a designated another region versus your main region that you use as a main source or main place where you keep your data. There is a designated another region. What's special? Why do we say that there is a third region? What is special in this another region versus any other region that I perhaps may want to pick as my backup plan? Is there a special internet connection between those data centers? What's there?
Yeah, first of all all of the data centers from Microsoft are connected through backbone. So it's internal Microsoft-ish internet physical cables under the Atlantic, going and spinning the entire world through the connectivity coming from Microsoft.
All right. So let's come back to the business aspect. Let's imagine that someone from our audience is a CEO or CFO and is hearing all those technical details. What should they do next? Where should they start after this realization? Okay, we perhaps need to check our resiliency or our business continuity plan.
Yes, I would suggest that the next day, once you are at your office, go to your CTO tech lead office and ask the very hypothetical question that can happen if, firstly, what's our primary cloud region? And after knowing it, what will happen if this region will go offline for 24, 48, 72 hours? How that will impact our revenue and our processes? And this is the most important question, meaning connecting where, what if, and then what's the consequence for us? So get the answer, get the precise answer with the numbers, and you can quantify the impact for your revenue for sure. But then immediately the discussion about the recovery plan will start. So you need to create it, you need to design it, you need to have a person accountable for it, just to make sure that once it happens, and it can happen, it may happen, you will be prepared.
Mm-hmm. So obviously technical teams will be involved in this discussion. What is their role in this whole concept of business continuity plan and this discussion with CFO and CEO?
Yeah, good question. And here, their role would be to build and then execute based on the specific priorities, the recovery plan. And the priorities are important here, meaning that before the IT can do something, business should put, at least classify your workloads, your business into, let's say that 3 categories, 3 tiers, which will set the urgency and importance for those processes, meaning that the most important tier will be all aspects that are related to impacting your revenue in a very short time, everything what is customer facing, everything what is related to banking processes, payment processing. Yes, that's the most important aspect. So, and then tier 2, tier 3, you will categorize that based on knowing your business. So once we get from the business the priorities, the levels on importance, then an exercise. We need to, first of all, technically make sure that we have the failover plan. Failover is basically a mechanism that is switching your system to the backup system when the main one is broken. So we need to automate failover. To automate failover, we need to define, yes, based on what thresholds. As an engineering team, you get those priorities, so those categories. And then based on them, you start to build the failover automatic plan. Failover means that your system, all of your databases or small elements, will switch back to the previous state in some other form. But you need to have a backup plan, failover plan, for every item that you are using. And what's important here, remember that having a single human person accountable for this exercise, or even 2 of them as a primary and secondary, will not be super good approach nowadays, as can the data center challenges can start in the middle of the night, and there will be always some challenges to reach out to the people, to ask them to click the button at 3 a.m. under the pressure and a huge stress. So infrastructure as a code and automation of your disaster recovery plan as well, meaning that we should be able to deploy very easily, to switch the infrastructure to be deployed to some other region, some other data center, some other maybe cloud as well, but going into this direction is fundamental. And here we don't have to wait for something to happen. Microsoft Azure is offering some very nice system application service, Azure Chaos Studio, which is exactly designed to test your environment in a way that's prepared for an outage. So it will test your backups, if you have backups. It will show you if you are prepared or not, because yes, the Chaos Studio will cause chaos, but it's the best way to prepare for a potential chaos that may happen.
I love this name, Chaos Studio. It brings to my mind several instances when business continuity procedure was deployed, and I was either part of this procedure. There were, I think, 2 instances when I was responsible for leading this procedure, and indeed there is a chaos at the beginning, and having the procedure helps to put this chaos back in order, and then everyone knows what should be done as a next step. All right, Estera, let's somehow start our summary. Maybe let's start with this question. If there is any bare minimum that should be secured in terms of resilience, what comes to your mind?
I think that all of the processes critical for the revenue should have the backup plan. If those processes are operating on some cloud infrastructure, that cloud infrastructure should have a disaster recovery plan, which many times is just having a availability zone configured or having a paired region that will pick up the function after the main one is not available.
Very good. Thank you. All right. I think it's time for some closing thoughts. Maybe let me start with some closing thoughts. Coming back to this motto that I adopted as my motto as well, because I like it very much, that it is good when you can sleep when the wind blows. So taking time to think about what may happen and making plan B, plan C, maybe plan D is a good practice. If everything is okay, that's fine. No one even think about it. But it's good to think about it because we need to be ready for something that is unexpected. There is another saying, right? Expect unexpected. So it's really, really true in terms of resilience in IT systems. Any thoughts from your end, Estera?
I think that I would love our listeners to stay with this reality-shaking sentence that even cloud computing and cloud means cloud, and clouds are above our heads. The cloud infrastructure is physical. It sits in buildings. Building exists in countries in some political environment, geopolitical reality, and we should keep that in mind always, that this concept of cloud computing is with us. It's helping us to move the needle for our world. At the same time, it's physical. And what happened in March 2026 reminds us that the data centers can be in our region, district, they can burn, that can be hit by drones. And I believe that I would love to empower every decision maker that is listening to us to start from today the discussion, at least what's your religion that you are using and what's your disaster recovery strategy.
Thank you very much. If you are facing a business challenge and you would like to share this business challenge with us, feel free to do so. You can contact myself or Estera. You have some links and QR codes. Feel free to do it via LinkedIn. That's the quickest way and perhaps easiest way to contact us. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe our channel and also make sure that you get notifications about upcoming episodes. We also invite you to follow our page on LinkedIn, Clouds on Mars page. There is a link and QR code also somewhere here on your screen. And summing up, let your data continue making impact, even if this means that you need to fine-tune your business continuity procedure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Estera. See you in the next episode. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.